I'm very old. Oh. I had no idea what this thing was all about. Halfway through the evening, I've been dazzled by the earlier contributions, apart from Barry, who was drunk, I must say. And he'd been taking a lot of drugs lately, and if you didn't understand what he was saying, he had no idea. No, you were very good, Barry. No, you were. My printing wasn't too large for you? Barry pissed me off years ago. We were flying to Australia and we bought rubric cubes at duty free. Barry, who'd been pulling fleas out of his own hair and eating a banana and stuff, solved the rubric cube before we took off. I've never solved it since. And Barry, I'm still pissed off and bitter. My introduction, I started out as a vet student who got thrown out, and thank God, ended up in political journalism by mistake and doing cartooning. But my life really changed dramatically in 1990 when I was asked to fly to Australia to take part in the sesquicentenary dinner in Canberra. And they said, the main speaker is Ed Hillary, you will be the light relief. I was the parsley for the evening. And I flew over to Australia with Ed Hillary, and he was very silent and very solemn. And I told the audience in Canberra that Ed was very quiet, and we flew at the same height as Everest, and it was minus 50 degrees outside. And Ed asked for a blanket and went and sat out on the wing the whole flight to Australia. And when I finished my speech, I got quite a lot of laughs. When I sat down, Ed said to me, those eyebrows lifted up, said, "Oh, that was quite a good speech. I'll have to lift my game." And he was a competitive old prick. Who would have thought? No. And he was absolutely dazzling. His speech was absolutely dazzling. And we drank a lot of Irish whiskey that night. We became mates. And I said, "How come no one's ever made a film of your life?" "Oh, the right people haven't asked." I said, "Who?" He said, "Oh, Clint Eastwood and Robert Redford asked. They went to work." And I said, little Tommy Scott from Fielding, "I'd like to do it." "Oh, you're the right person." 25 years later, he's completely wrong. But I did get to travel with him, and TVNZ asked me to do a television documentary on his life. I've never made a documentary in my life before this, and television asked for a 4x1 hour doco on it. So, in the honour of the Brazilian football team, roll over, Fabio. This is me and Ed at the Williamsfield Air Force Base in Antarctica. The old man on the left with no hair is me. The young man on the other side is Redmond Hillary. That is our C-130 Herc, which is taking us to Antarctica. We're on the edge of Antarctica here. It's still a 5-hour flight to the South Pole. 40 years earlier, Ed drove there overland in farm tractors. Massey Ferguson farm tractors, 15 horsepower, took him 87 days, and we landed here on this airfield, and beneath us there's 10,000 feet of frozen water. So much water it has dimpled the surface of the earth like an orange. And we headed over to that geodesic dome. There's my film crew, there's Ed and there's me, and it was the most fantastic experience. There we were at the Scott and Munson Pole. They named it after me. And I interviewed Ed about driving overland to the South Pole and beating the Poms. He humiliated the English. They wanted to get there first. They had snowcats which were powerful, and he did them in farm tractors and beat them. Where did Ed's ambition come from? It staggers me that where did Ed Hillary's drive come from? He was always the smallest boy in the class, always through primary school. He was picked on, he was bullied at school, he was bullied at home, he felt humiliated, and he was a lonely kid. His mother wouldn't let him go down the road and play with other school kids. He went to school, and about 2 weeks into his school at Auckland Grammar, the gym teacher said to him, "Hillary, look at you, you're deformed, you're a cripple, your ribs poke out." He said to young Ed Hillary, "Go over there and stand down the back of the gymnasium with all the other deformed people." Ed said, "Oh, that remark stayed with me all my life, really." And Ed could not take his clothes off in front of a woman. He was a virgin on Everest. But he came home, true story. Virgin, I'll explain the word later, Barrett. And he came home and he retreated into books. Ed's escape were books. And he read books about great adventurers. He actually got to Everest in 1951. This crevasse blocked their path. The British were there with young Ed, and a man called Shipton said, when Everest is climbed, Ed Hillary will be there or thereabouts. That crevasse stopped them going any further in 1951. But they knew that this tall, lanky Kiwi would get there. Back in 1953, when he finally got there again with Tenzing, there was a snow bridge over that crevasse, and Ed leapt onto it, and it broke underneath his weight, and he started falling through the crevasse. We had a workshop did this drawing, not a bad drawing, and Ed was tumbling down to this crevasse, and they can go down 100 feet on Everest, and Ed said, oh, I felt my life flashing before me. Tenzing saved his life. But still, the Poms picked 2 Englishmen to go to the top, and the Englishman there is Tom Baldwin, looking up at the summit ridge. He's the first man to stare up that summit ridge. He thought, I will go on and climb Everest. And his companion said, if you do, you will never see Jennifer again. Tom Baldwin there burst into tears, and the 2 Englishmen turned back. 2 days later, it was Ed Hillary and Tenzing's turn. There were 2 Sherpas who were sick when they woke up in the morning. Ed's carrying 65 pounds on his back, Tenzing's carrying 40. No other human being in the world could carry 65 pounds on Everest. And he sometimes took his oxygen mask off so he could prove to himself if the oxygen ran out, he wouldn't fall over. That's how strong he was. This picture you saw earlier, what I love about it is Tenzing's body is full of tension. He's kept his oxygen mask on, his body is tense. Look at Ed Hillary, he's grinning. He's got no oxygen mask, he's grinning, and his hands are soft. He's holding his hands like this, he is so relaxed. Ed Hillary knew he was going to get to the top. He took 3 pictures of Tenzing, a picture to the north, to the south, the east and the west. He didn't take a picture of himself because he told me he didn't trust Tenzing with the camera. He said to me, this is true, well, I dragged the bastard up the last 100 feet. I wasn't going to have him step off and take the proof with him. This is New Zealander George Lowe, who should have been there with Ed Hillary. The 2 best climbers in 1953 were the New Zealander George Lowe and Ed Hillary. And that's Ed down on the bottom there. When Ed came down from the mountain, George said, how'd you get on, Ed? Oh, well, George, we knocked the bastard off. George, thought you probably must have. Here, have a cup of soup. That's the way New Zealanders talk, you know. The news came to London the morning of the Queen's coronation. The Queen was on her way to be crowned, and they came over loudspeakers and all through London. Mount Everest has been climbed by Ed Hillary. He became a superstar. He was on the BBC, he was lauded, he was feted. He was still a virgin who was too scared to take his clothes off because he had deformed ribs. He felt terribly insecure and didn't know how on earth. He said to George once about picking up girls is like my golf game. I'm okay on the fairway, I'm hopeless on the green. He was madly in love with her. Madly in love with her. He was so shy he couldn't ask her to marry him. His mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, said, Ed, would you like me to ask Louise for you? Oh, could you? So she rang Louise. Louise, I'm here with Ed, darling. He'd like to marry you. What do you say? Yes! So he married Louise. His life changed. He went back to Nepal looking for the Yeti in 1961. And he couldn't climb high mountains anymore. He got altitude sickness. He said, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? This young kid came up to him and said, would you please build a school for us in Komjong? And this young man asked me to build a school. Him and Louise were happy as can be for 20 years, and then her plane crashed, taking off from Kathmandu. This is a picture of Ed at the crash site. He looks like he's rather grim-faced, but looks like he's on top of things. He wasn't. He became a dead man walking for 2 years. Ed Hillary was suicidal. He drank a bottle of whiskey every night. He didn't care whether he lived or died. He would wake up every night with the same nightmare of seeing a plane crash over and over again into paddy fields, till he went up to Ganges, and a Hindu ceremony on the banks of the Varanasi, where Ed Hillary's grief was lifted off him in a ceremony on the banks of the Varanasi. He's very suspicious and cautious. I included him because when I was making a tribute documentary on Ed for TV1, I asked this guy here, he was a friend of Ed's. They had something shared, they both did something extraordinary. He lost a daughter at 16 and so did Ed. This hermit almost agreed to be in the interview. In the last minute, he chickened out, but he wrote me a lovely letter and he said, Ed Hillary and I have both gone to places beyond the reach of the most avid tourist. And I thought that was a lovely expression from Neil Armstrong. But what Ed said most of all, which is true for all of us, it's not the mountain we conquer, it's ourselves.